Welcome, everyone, to the Sport Fuels Life podcast. I'm Bill Riddle, your host. We hope you enjoy our latest episode.
National High School Tennis Coaches Conference. I'm Bill Riddle, your host. We're super excited because we're kicking off year two with amazing presentations tonight, but kind of leading us off down this path is a buddy of mine, Chris Young. Chris, thank you for being here with us tonight, man.
I'm looking forward to it and excited to be here again with you.
Yeah. So Chris, since we talked last, you kind of changed jobs. You're not on the court as much anymore. Tell everybody kind of what you're doing, and also maybe just give them a little bit of what your history's been, because you've been in tennis a long, long time, man.
Yeah, I was in tennis for about 25 years as a head coach. I started at Oklahoma Christian at NAIA days in 2000 and was there 2000 to 2004. Was part of a NAIA national championship team in 2003. Then moved on in 2004 to, after that season, to Wichita State. And I was at Wichita State from 2004 to 2009. And I know we've got the current Wichita State head coach, Jacob, coming on. So excited about
Yeah.
that and still follow his program. So that's kind of a nice little handoff tonight. And then 2009 to, this past July, I was at Oklahoma State, 16 years as the head coach. And at both Oklahoma State and Wichita State, I was the director of tennis. So oversaw both programs and coached on the women's side. And then recently now I'm back at my alma mater, Oklahoma Christian, where I began my coaching career. And I'm the senior vice president of the university, and I oversee athletics as well as all advancement for the university. So I'm in charge of all of our fundraising efforts, our alumni relations, and athletics. We still have an athletic director, but I have oversight of that and just walk hand in hand with the president for all the areas involving athletics, what the future of athletics is going to be at the university, as well as fundraising, which, as everybody knows, at a small college level, a small school level, a high school level, any level, fundraising is
Yeah.
the name of the game to give more resources. So I'm excited to be back where I started and hopefully making a difference there with everything I've learned.
Yeah. Well, it kind of sets us up perfectly. You've got this experience in tennis, then also, being the director of tennis, for schools, and then also in your role right now, kind of sets us up for what we want to talk about tonight, being, leadership, team building, culture, all those things that maybe are not necessarily always at the top of the radar, when coaches are out there. High school coaches, they wear a lot of hats, from fundraising to coaching to trying to build culture in their team. For you, what's kind of like number one thing that you have always kind of looked at when you're organizing a team, whether it be your players or the team that you have now, which is the people that are making the engine run?
Yeah, that's a great point. And, culture is kind of a buzzword a lot of times, and people use culture in so many different ways. And sometimes people don't even really know what their definition of culture really is. They know what a good culture looks like when you see it, and you know what a bad one looks like when you see it, but
Yeah.
sometimes you don't know what it takes to get there or how to really formulate that. So hopefully tonight that's what we can talk about in some of the next sessions. I know others can elaborate on as well. But I think, for young coaches, for high school coaches, just for any coach who's been doing it 40 years, you can still always learn a little bit more each and every day about how to define your culture. And
Yeah.
what your culture is to me is your standards. What's the standards of the program? What's the program really all about? What does the program represent? And I think as a coach or as a leader of any organization or any team, that's what you have to ask yourself. What do I
Right.
want this program, this team to really represent? Where are we going? And how are we going to act along the way? What are the things that we're going to do that's really going to define who we are? And I've never been a big believer in rules. I think a lot of times people want to have team rules, and I think rules are those things that are made to be broken sometimes. And so rules
Yeah.
seem a little bit, they tie people up a little bit. They tell you what you can't do. As opposed to I believe in standards, and standards is who we are and what we're going to become and what we do on a daily basis. And I think the biggest part that I would say to this is, as coaches or leaders, we're messengers of what excellence looks like. And so, you are the model every single day. And what makes it so hard about being a leader or a coach is there's no days off because every day you define the standard and no matter a good day or bad day, whatever you accept becomes the standards. You can have all the team rules and policies you want, but whatever you allow as the leader, that becomes your standard, and that's your default rules right there. And so, as a coach, every day you're the messenger of what excellence looks like, and you have to pay attention that people around you, they're taking their cues from you. And when you show up early, it's one thing if the coach says, "Hey, let's everybody be 5 minutes early," but the coach is showing up on time, right at time every day. What message does
Right.
that send? And eventually, the nature of any group or any team, you've been doing this a long time, so they take on the character and the identity of the leader. And so, every day that you're around, if you're holding that standard and you're having that message of excellence, eventually you're going to lift everybody up to where you are and where you're going, and they're going to start speaking like you are. They're going to start doing things. I'm not a believer at all in that you need to, curse or use bad language when you're around your team. But
Right.
it's one of those things that if you just don't do it as a coach, then they catch themselves saying, "Oh, I can't say that around you," without you even having to say that's a rule, right? Because they know you don't
Right.
use that language. They know you don't talk to people in those terms. And so they know it's just not acceptable. And
Right.
it's just kind of a little example of cues that, your environment kind of shapes who you are. And
Yeah.
as a leader, I think it's really important that we have that. And so as we kind of kick off this whole conference, when we talk about culture from the very beginning, I would just encourage the people that are listening to these sessions just to pick up the little different tips and insights and things that coaches share and mold that into something that you feel like you can model every single day. And I think the last thing before we move on and I pitch it back to you is I think, leadership needs to be authentic. You got to be who you
Yeah.
are. And, the way that you run your team is going to be different than the way that I run my team. But people, especially young kids these days, they're craving authenticity, people that are genuine, people that really care about them. And so they're going to see right through it if you're trying to become something that you're not. So while in this conference, you can come up with a lot of different ideas. I think it's really important for all the coaches involved just to be able to think to themselves, okay, how do I make this my own? And how do I lead in a way that I can follow up and measure excellence every day with my impact?
Right. One of the things that in the college ranks, I think sometimes we have it maybe a little bit easier in some respects, but for high school coaches or maybe even a team that doesn't really have the budget or the resources and things like that, you know, how would you suggest they kind of bring their team together, whether it be team activities or some things out there that you've seen that are low cost, no cost, just sleepovers, or maybe it's not sleepovers, but something like that. Go out on the boat, or are there
Yeah.
things you have seen that have been like, I saw this myself, or we did it, and it really brought us together collectively?
Yeah, I think the one thing I always tried to have is like a team mantra or saying that the team was going to really rally around that year. Something that's a certain language. It's a catchphrase. It's something that your team. It's for this team, and this is who we are, and we're going to talk about it every time we come together with a huddle. Or every time we do something, we're going to talk about this, and just really selling your team on this is what our team's identity is going to be. For instance. One year, our team in 2016 at Oklahoma State, the girls said, look, we want to prove that teamwork and togetherness really will go farther than sometimes talent. We talked about, all these teams out there with talent. But so they really are like, let's prove that. Let's kind of like set that out that we can really come together, right? And so we
Yeah.
kept talking about this word together. And so I kept challenging them on, all right, let's build off that word together. And eventually they came up with the mantra, grind together, shine together. And, I said, all right, you guys have come up with this. So I got t-shirts made with this. We put it up, that saying all over where we are. And every time we came together, we said grind together, shine together. And, it was like together was really emphasized, right? And it was something that they felt like they were a part of and they got to do together. And so you're talking about a high school group and maybe a high school tennis team. What's some memories that those kids are going to have, and what's some reasons why those kids would want to be on a high school tennis team? Well, most of those kids want to be a part of a team. They want to be a part of a group that really is doing something. And within that group, they want to feel like there's something special. And so you want to create a culture. And I think that's where, phrases and catchphrases and different things. Man, you put a phrase on a t-shirt and you give that group a t-shirt that says, this is our team. This is who we are.
Right.
And they're the only ones in school that has that. A $10 t-shirt, something that kid may keep with them the rest of their life. It's funny enough, I was at a NBA basketball game recently, and it came time in one of the timeouts, and they were doing the t-shirt toss. And I mean, people are losing their minds over this t-shirt, and they don't even know what the t-shirt says, right?
Yeah.
But a guy looked, I said, isn't it funny how like t-shirts are still so popular to throw out? And the guy said, well, I think people want something that not everybody else is going to get. And
Yeah.
that really stuck with me, right? Because when we're trying to build a team, you want these high school coaches to have a team of like, all right, we're going to do something with our team that maybe no one else is doing. The basketball team is special because they've got this, the football team, whatever, the tennis team, we're going to do these things. What's going to make us special? And I think it's, maybe the care and the concern that the coach has and making everybody feel valued. But what if it's just something as, kind of building your culture around a saying, and we've got t-shirts to kind of go along, and the kids are going to wear those, in their high schools and say, hey, I represent the tennis team and I'm proud to represent the tennis team and this is who we are. Just giving them something to be proud about. I don't think it costs a lot, but I think teaching them their value as individuals, I think coaches can go a long way in impacting kids' lives when they make kids feel valued. And I think that's
Right.
first and foremost. And then give them something that kind of shows that they can be proud to wear around.
Well, I'm with you there on the t-shirt, and I'll share with you something that we did. This was years ago, and in a college match, the clinch, when you're 3-3 and you win that, it's a big deal, right?
Yeah.
Everybody runs out there and they celebrate. And I think the same thing, it doesn't have the same effect in the high school realm as probably it should. And to me, that would build some culture. But one of the things we did was I created these, it just said hashtag clinched on it. And if you were the clinch match and you won, you got that shirt. Nobody else had that. Very kind of highly coveted and sought after thing that, made it kind of stand us aside from everybody else. But I agree with you. Something that, and I wrote down the grind together, shine together, because you may see that in Firehawk Orange
I love
somewhere.
it. I love it. I got the copyrights. I mean, we're going to get Sport Fuels Live to give us the t-shirts to put that on, and we're going to put something together. But
I
hey,
love it.
I think, one thing, Bill, is you can do a lot of things, right? I've seen teams do like a hard hat, or something like that. And we had that one time and we passed it around at practice. At the end of every day, I'd bring kids together and whoever was working the hardest, I'd throw the hat on top of them and say, man, I think it's really important to look for ways to give kids validation for the positive things. Too many times as coaches, we're pointing out the negatives or we're pointing out what they can do better. How many times do you spend, really validating kids and that's what's going to draw kids to want to be a part of these high school teams and different things is a place where, look, it's not going to be fake and we're just going to pump everybody up. I think there's going to be standards and we're going to hold you accountable. Kids want
Yeah.
that too, but they also want to be validated. One of the things that I always tried to do as a coach is every night I would go home and I would try to think of someone that I could text on my team and just let them know that I noticed something that they did that day. And I mean, how many times my players that played for me will still tell me to this day, I loved getting your texts. I love at night when I was the one, because then it starts to go around and they know, that it's happening or whatever. And when you catch them in a way where they didn't know that you noticed something at practice that day, they did something and, it kind of caught your eye, but maybe you didn't have a chance to stop in that moment or say something, or you heard about something they did on campus or whatever. But if every night you told one kid something positive that you knew they were doing, just gave them a little encouragement, that's taken 2 minutes out of your day to shoot them a quick message. But that goes a long way. And I know there's probably some, boundaries and some different things within high schools, and maybe it's not something you could do as much after hours
Right.
like college teams do. But maybe it's just bringing the team together and giving the hard hat out to somebody that did something, or having something else where you validate certain things within the culture of your team that you appreciate, and kids now start to notice that and start to look for that.
Yeah, I think one of the things too, in the high school teams, you've got such a wide variety of levels a lot of times, which sometimes, as we know, can kind of segment or segregate, the team,
Yeah.
because you do have typically at the high school level, you got a one and two, and you got like three, four, and five are kind of different level, and you've got, it just kind of goes down the ranking there. Do you have any suggestions there that would help some of our coaches when they're starting to look at, like, okay, well, it's hard for me to even get a practice together because of the different levels. Any thoughts or suggestions there?
Yeah, I mean that happens. Look at all levels. You've got even at Division 1 level, you're going to have a kid that's a walk on, and maybe they're not quite at the level to practice with your number one player every day, right? But I think you want to find opportunities for that. I think there's always like games and different things that we can do, whether it's um, ping pong, or when they're passing the racket and they're just trying to get one more ball over the net. Maybe we always did a couple drills within our team to warm up every day when we started together. And maybe that was the only time we were together. But I stole a drill from Greg Patton years ago where, everybody would kind of warm up short court, right? With a little short ball. Well, you would hit, would have them in two lines. And so you warm up and you're at the service line and you're just rolling the ball over the net, and you got to go back and touch the back fence and then get back in the back of the line. And you got 8 or 10 kids. That's not hard for them to do, but then they're just keeping one ball going. And even at the high school level, you can probably make that drill work, where
Right.
you get that ball just back and forth. Then, we kind of work up to volley, and you're like keeping the ball going and you're volleying, you're doing volley to volley, and we'll see how long we keep it going. And then we made it a game every now and then where,
Right.
like put different parameters, but you do something like that and it brings everybody together. Or, we would do kind of some beat the pro type stuff where I'd have some of my top players play doubles. And anytime you start bringing doubles into the mix, you can bring a higher level, a lower level together. And you got doubles on one side and they got to win a couple different points to get over, maybe baseline point, a volley, overhead type thing. And you just
Right.
rotate different people in. And yeah, I mean, it takes a little buy-in sometimes from your top kids to try to like jump in and do that. But man, the other kids really appreciate that, and everybody likes to be included. So I think just continuing to look for opportunities where you can do big game type drills, which I know a lot of high school coaches are looking for, and in ways to kind of do it. And look, if it's 5 minutes every day that you all warm up, if you've got 20 kids, you put 10 on each side, and you just do a little short ball warm up drill and say, hey, let's see today if we can get 20 balls in a row, or everybody goes through it, or something like that, where everybody kind of comes together. I think it still can be done.
Right. Well, you mentioned something a second ago, and you said fun, right? And at the end of the day, I don't care if you're playing Division 1 college tennis or you're playing high school or middle school. We're still talking about young adults, big kids, whatever terminology you want to use, right? And at some point, even the most serious ones want to have some fun.
Mhm.
So your take on balancing a practice with, I gotta get these things done, but also I gotta find a way to factor in some fun. I kind of feel like a lot of times coaches forget to factor in the fun element, and I don't know that that's the best way to go about it. If it's not, if they're not having a good time, then we're going to lose them a lot of times.
Yeah, and I think there's every year, I think with every team, there's certain drills or games, I would say, that every team kind of likes a little bit more than others. And kind of when you find those, I encourage everybody to put those in your back pocket and, use those. I think as a coach, one of the things you can do best for your team is make practice unpredictable. Like I think there's something about having routines and about doing certain things. I was big on organization and routines, and practice was a certain amount of time and different things like that. But every now and then I think you got to like surprise them and change it up. And if you feel like the season's getting long or the day's getting long or, we haven't done something, start off with something or just break up the middle of a practice by going to something that's fun, and always
Right.
let them know like you got to keep them a little bit guessing, because I think where you lose the fun is you do the same thing every single day without any kind of break. I think it's just, you can throw in something that maybe as a coach you don't think's that fun, but the kids do because it's
Right.
something different, right? So I was always surprised what things they thought were fun and not. But I think it's kind of the energy and the passion that you as the coach do it with, right? I mean, I think
Yeah.
that's one of the things I admire about you. And if people haven't followed you on social media, you're all about having fun, At least that's the portrayal, right? Is you're going to be out
Yeah.
there having fun and you want people to come to your program because they want to have some fun. And ultimately that's what you want as a coach. And that's where high school programs are going to really grow is, people are maybe trying tennis for the first time or they played other sports and they're playing tennis at a certain point in the season, that they just want to have fun. I think you can do that with boundaries. You can do it with the right culture and with the right standards. I think all those things can kind of go hand in hand. And when you get the standards right and you get the approach right, you can easily throw in more fun items and make it
Right.
work.
Right. At the high school level, you do get a lot of brand new tennis players that come out. And I remember back to my days, running the country club, and it was like clockwork. Every January, the phone would start ringing. Hey, I need 12 lessons because my kids got, tryouts coming up in 2 weeks, and we got to get good by then, right? And as a high school coach, I mean that's kind of your life. You can't really you're not really connected to the kids when on the off season, and then all of a sudden it's time to go, and then they got to get to playing. Give us your thoughts on like how would you encourage, or how could the coaches keep kids playing throughout the year because their season is very small, and you get a lot of first timers coming out there. You got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's trying to stay engaged and kind of having opportunities for them. I think you can have certain events, just one-off type events that, even when they might be in the middle of another season, you have just a match play day or you have just a skills day or games or something like that where you offer it to kids and you try to put it at different points in the season. I know all kinds of states have different rules about when coaches can have access to kids and stuff like that. Just
Yeah.
finding opportunities, around that to build it in, I think is good, or encouraging kids to go to certain camps and different things like that. For the last decade or so, I had one of the largest Nike tennis camps in the country, and we'd run about 150 kids per week, and so I knew the challenges of putting that number of kids on 18 courts and
Right.
balancing it out and keeping them all engaged and doing stuff like that. And a lot of that is they want to compete. I think a lot of kids like to compete and do something, so I think you can come up with games and different match play days and competitions to keep them engaged, and then even just maybe emailing them and providing them with opportunities, whether it's USTA or coming up with leagues or even locally just hosting some match play days or different things. Whether there's so many different opportunities now that we didn't have for a long time. I mean, you got UTR having opportunities that you can host
Right.
different things at any level. You've got, WTN now, and you've got USTA, and you've got so many different ways that you can do different kind of match play, skill day type events. And some of them can be, you know, fast four sets, different stuff
Yeah.
like that, where you keep it fun and engaged. And it doesn't have to be a long day. They don't have to be out there playing forever, but, come in and play tiebreakers. One of the things that it's kind of funny, we started doing years ago at our tennis camps that the kids absolutely loved, and they did it this year at the Australian Open, is the 1 point
Oh,
tournament.
yeah.
And we'd have the whole camp, 150 kids, and it's a 1 point tournament for coaches that don't know. I mean, you basically get in there and you can spread them out of however many people, and it's just 1 point, and someone feeds the ball in, or you can do serve and you rotate the serves. But we just fed the ball in, for them. So no one had the advantage of the serve over another.
Yep.
You play 1 point, and if you win, you move on. If you lose, you're out. And that 1 point tournament would just take on a life of its own. And they did it at the Australian Open this year. They had people all over Australia competing in a 1 point tournament to get the chance to play on the Australian Open courts. And wouldn't you know, an amateur actually made their way all the way through and won that thing. Now, they gave
Right.
a $1 million prize, which I know that would incentivize anybody. But what if you did that, at your local high school, and you just had a 1 point tournament, every so often, and you had different prizes, and anybody in town could come out and do that. Those types of things. You can get creative with that. If it's, even 10 point tiebreak tournaments or whatever it is, it doesn't take a long time, but it keeps people engaged, and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well, for those that are watching either live or watching us on a replay here, this is being brought to you by Sports Fuels Life, and all of the information that we've got, all the seminars, all the presentations are going to be saved and on the platform. But Chris, instead of waiting to the very end, what I always like to do is, if anybody is watching now and you have a question, you can just put something in the chat box there. I'll see it. We'll kind of bring it up. Because if you're like me, you have a thought that goes in your head, and if you wait too long, it falls back out, and then you're like, "What was I thinking about?" So yeah. So if anyone has a question, feel free to kind of put it in here for Chris, and we'd love to ask him. But you along the lines of the 1 point tournament, right, and match play. And you mentioned match play several times. I'd love your thoughts on this. A lot of high school coaches will play a challenge match, right? And that's how they determine their lineup. And for many years, I was kind of the guy that would kind of knock the idea of the challenge match, because to me, it always kind of separated the players. I beat you, and then now there's a kind of a rift because it wasn't my best day. I wasn't feeling great or whatever. Give me your thoughts on the challenge match versus practice match idea, and how we could spin that into something good for the team.
That's a great question. And, coaching girls for as long as I did, I think it's, that competitiveness is really important, and being able to keep that team unity is crucial. Like, they got to be able to get along, and all teams do, not just girls or guys, but I think it's important, with making sure your teams get along well. So, the challenge with that is challenge matches sometimes can pit people against each other, and some teams, I think it's a little bit, I always thought, honestly, a little bit team by team. Some teams they could challenge each other and they could leave it there. And some teams, they just couldn't do that. And I think you got to be protective of that as a coach, and see that. I think there's also something to be said about, certain kids can show up a little bit better on match day, and they can do that, but you want to also encourage good practice habits. And so
Right.
I don't want to just say, hey, you've got the spot now because you won the match, and it doesn't really matter how you practice or how hard you work. And so you kind of don't want to pigeon yourself into a hole there as a coach. You want to have some room for that. But I would always, if it got right down to it and I personally just couldn't make the decision, then I would
Yeah.
say, okay, this is going to be, but I wouldn't always say that I did that across the board all the time. I think there's some coaches that like to do that, and if you just can't really make decisions, then I think then that's a tool that you can use. But I think you can also, there's a lot of different ways, Bill, that you can do it. I mean, I've done it some where I evaluated practice throughout the week, and I gave there's some metrics or some values. I scored practice based on, how I thought people were competing, and you can even, put that up there. You could put a ladder, and say, hey, this is kind of where I see things based on practice habits, people putting in extra work. I think you want to be able to reward the things that you feel like you build your program around, and the things that are important to you. And, when it comes down to just challenge matches, are you saying in that situation that winning is the only thing that really matters? You just have to ask yourself that. I'm not saying yes or no to that. So I'm probably not giving a great example to coaches. I'm just saying there's a lot of different ways to do it. I think it is an individual sport, and it comes down to, what's it going to be when it's time to lay it on the line on the court. And yeah, I think that there is some learning to that, maybe
Right.
kid's a real good practice player, but they tense up when the match is on the line. And I think putting them in those situations over and over
Yeah.
again, there were times where I had certain kids that one kid just couldn't beat the other kid. I mean, no matter what they did, right? And I just keep putting those kids against each other over and over again and making the kid that kind of had it over the other kid continue to prove it. And the other kid, and so finally, there was a breakthrough there, And so,
Right.
um, I think there's many ways to do it. I think in coaching, the one thing I would always say is don't box yourself in on your decisions. Don't give yourself, you always want to be able to have opportunities for you as a coach to evaluate different things that maybe aren't black and white. And, when you put things down on paper or you say this is the way we're going to do it, you got to be willing to back it up and go with that no matter kind of what happens.
Yeah. We got a question coming through here, but while I kind of look at that, I want to touch on this real quick because in the college ranks, we live and die by doubles, right? And I think many times, well, I'm going to say this. I think all the time doubles gets overlooked at the high school, middle school, junior level in general, right? Let's put them all in there in the same boat. How can we, as high school coaches, how can we help the high school coaches develop better doubles teams, which then in turn helps us down the road when they get to college or down the road because it is overlooked. What are your thoughts on how we can kind of better develop doubles?
Oh, you're speaking my language there. I mean, I love it. Doubles was a key to a lot of our success, and quite frankly, I think with high school coaches, doubles should be something that you do practice a lot because you can get more kids on the court, and doubles brings more people into it. So, especially high school coaches that are working with larger groups, doubles is where it's at, and I think you allow kids that maybe are have some athleticism, but maybe their tennis skill isn't quite there yet to be able to manage. But also, in those key moments, if you don't have good hands and good feel for the game, that sometimes gets exposed because when nerves take effect, what happens? A really critical point, that ball starts dropping short on both sides, and it's that kid that's willing to come forward and take that ball and come to the net. They're going to have a big advantage. A lot of times net points are won without someone having to hit a volley, but just that person that's courageous enough to hit the approach shot and come forward and
Right.
having to make that pass is a little harder than it needs to be sometimes when the match is on the line. So I would really encourage coaches to have that. That was one of the things I look for the most in recruiting is I would want to see the kid's hands. Show me the kid volleying before anything else. Show me your footwork and your hands at the net. And if you can have the feel for the game, I think some of the other things are easier to teach.
Well, and that's one of the things too. And you've looked at probably thousands of hours like I have of recruiting videos, and it is 99% just balls hit from the baseline, forehands and backhands to the point of, just fed balls, hand toss balls to the point I'm just like, I physically get sick nowadays when I look at recruiting videos. It's all ground strokes. Not enough time is spent on the volley
Yeah.
at any level. At any level. How much of your time in practice, or how much would you suggest to our coaches watching, should I take and spend on my volley? Because remember, the serve is important, doubles is important. There's all these important pieces. How much should I be spending on that?
Well, I think I would prioritize it in a couple ways. Number one, I think even more than the volleys, the most underutilized skill is the serve and return. That gets the point started, and I think it's always what people do at the end of practice. And
Yeah.
that, I changed my philosophy on that a lot, and I did a lot of serve plus one and return plus one, and you can rotate a lot of kids out in and out, and you could have two lines on this, one on each service box and one on each return and play like a cross court point. Serve plus one, play the point and then rotate out, and you can get a lot of kids through. I think the serve and return is key. And I think the second thing is the volley skills. I would really encourage coaches to do a lot with the continental grip, to work on your continental grip skills. And you can even do that with moving back from the baseline, having, using the slice and having kids work on being able to use that continental grip. You could do that with your serve. You can do it with your volleys. You can do it with your slice. And just being able to have that continental grip skills, I think is something that it's a challenge to be able to work through sometimes as kids are learning that. But if you give kids that opportunity, that's a skill that they can really keep that gives them a leg up. So I would say, if you divided up half your practice and you did serve and return and volleys for half the practice, and then the other half was the ground strokes, I think you'd really come out with a pretty good practice.
Yeah. Well, we've got a question in here. Here it is. We play 3 doubles and 2 singles matches per match with 2 courts to practice on, which is a typical thing from high school coaches. We got, not enough courts. What would you say the ideal size of a team would be? Struggling with the decision of between 10 to 12, have had 12 historically. Same for JV team, 8 players in a match, 2 courts. I always err on the side of more is better
Yeah.
because you don't know who's going to be hurt, sick, tired, or sad. But love to hear your thought on helping this out.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. And look, when I got to Oklahoma State, we didn't have indoor courts, so we would drive an hour to practice. And I found 2 indoor courts at a country club they let me use. And so I knew what it's like. I practiced 8 to 10 kids on our roster on 2 courts for several years before we were able to fundraise and get a facility. So I worked in this, and I think you keep 12, in my opinion. Like, unless there's a real break between 10 and 12, I say more is always better because you never know who's going to shine. And like you said, there's always different ways to do it. But, okay, so you've got 6 kids per court. I think you can work with that. You could work with 4 kids on one court and 8 even on another, or 6 and 6. I think you could do, 3 and 3, doing a lot of different things. And I think, anytime you can do multiples of 2, let's say you have 8 kids on a court. I think there's a lot of things that you can do. I mean, you could have 2 kids up volleying, and you could have other kids rotating in from the baseline. I think you could even hitting cross court. You could have 4 kids on each side, and a kid hits 2 balls and rotates out, and you're doing cross court. And that's helping your doubles and your singles by working your cross court patterns. I think that's keeping things simple. I think sometimes maybe people don't realize, but tennis is such a directional game, and your cross court patterns are so important, and just keeping things simple. So I think there's a lot of things you could do with 2 courts and 12 kids. I think it's just about keeping the tempo of the practice going. Just like I said, you could have 8 kids on a court, and you could be doing a lot of serve plus 1 stuff. I have a kid serving and a kid waiting behind them, make sure they're a little bit farther behind so they don't get hit, let them play the point out. But what if you're having 2 cross court points going at the same time? There's 4 kids playing, there's 4 kids waiting. As soon as that point's over, they rotate in. You can even keep score between the teams, 4 and 4, and play to 21 or whatever. And you're serving and returning, and you're playing the point out cross court. And then you rotate one side's always serving, then you rotate one side's always returning, and man, you can get a lot of mileage out of that for sure. I think then you can do doubles. Like I always could do six kids on a court with doubles. I'd have two people always serving, right, and then 2 teams rotating in, and you play 2 points each. So each returning side of the doubles team gets to play a point, and then you rotate out. And I've got one of my doubles teams that's always the serving team, and so I've got a server and a returner, and they're over there playing. And then the 2 teams come in, they each return their return side, then they rotate out, and we keep doing that. And then we rotate the server and the net player, on the serving team side, and you rotate through. That you can do, if you had 12 kids, that could get you going a long time practicing doubles. And then maybe you want to do some singles points. I think you put 4 kids on a court, and you have 2 kids playing a point, winner stays on, and then loser rotates out, and you kind of rotate around that way. And if you win 2 points in a row, 3 points in a row, you come over and you're on the serving side. I mean, you could have 3 kids returning and 1 kid serving, and the minute that the returning kids win 2 points in a row, they come over and now they're the server. So I think there's a lot of things that you could do, and I'm more than happy to give any ideas. I know that Sports Fuels Live is going to be a great resource for a lot of people to be able to get drills and ideas. And I know following this conference, we'll be putting up some more things, and
Yeah.
always happy to help people with drills and ideas.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna throw out a quick shameless plug here because I know a lot of times people think, well, gosh, when you're in college, you got all these resources, and it was great to hear you talk about going, driving to go play on two indoor courts at Oklahoma State. When you think about big schools like that, you think, oh gosh, they've got money, they've always had money, life is easy, right? And if you go to our site or follow University of Tennessee Southern Tennis, you will see us practicing 8 to 10 people on one indoor court that we are lucky enough to have on our campus, which is not actually a tennis court. It is an OmniTurf multi-purpose facility that I said, you know what, we're turning this into something. And yeah, I think to your point though, Chris, is like you have to sometimes kind of get out of your own way of like, let's just try it. And what's the absolute worst that can happen? It falls apart. But I bet you that trying some of these things, directionals or multiple people and rotating back and forth, the kids are having a good time. You can mix the levels, you can hide some levels in there, but yet they're just hitting balls. Because at the end of the day, isn't that really what they want?
Yeah, yeah. And look, I think if you teach a lot of double skills, it'll help them with their singles. I know that we just talked about three doubles and two singles in a format. Look, if you get really good at playing the cross court points and playing cross court tennis, you're going to be successful in doubles and singles. If you at the high school level, you're forcing the kid to beat you with the down the line game, I like my chances if I really am locked in on my cross court patterns. I know where I'm going to serve to get the ball back cross court. I know what I'm going to do to set it up. I think if you practice those things over and over again, you develop a lot of confidence in what you're doing.
Well, we had another question come in, and I really like this one, and I think I know where he's going with it. What's on your mind as a coach when you're watching your kids play?
Well, that's a good question. I think there's a lot of things on my mind. I think it depends on each kid. But I'm really looking for how do I help this kid improve, right? How do I help this person? Some kids really it's technical. I'm looking for is there like small little technical adjustments I can make. Sometimes, you need to encourage them mentally. And, there are some things that maybe they can focus on and just challenging them to stay engaged from a mental standpoint. I think that's the thing as a coach is you're always looking for how can I help this particular player this particular day. And that's the challenge and that's the beauty of coaching. That's the part that I miss about coaching is really trying to find out how do I help each person get better that particular day, right? And you go there and man, sometimes you can read it on a kid's body language. They've had a bad day, they've had a bad test, boyfriend, girlfriend broke up with them, or something happened, and it's like, all right, let's make practice the best thing you do today. That's what I always tell people. Let's make practice your best 2 hours of your day or whatever. And so when I'm looking as a coach and I'm watching my team perform, I want to see what does this kid need in order to become better, more successful. And I think that's the challenge. Maybe they just need a little technical adjustment. Maybe they're
Yeah.
missing balls because footwork, maybe the grip on the racket, the way that I'm preparing. Maybe it's they've got all that and they're too technical, and they're not
Yeah.
focusing on keeping it simple and it's certain patterns. And so I want to teach them certain patterns of play that, okay, I'm going to hit every three shots cross court before I go down the line because I just want to execute here, or I'm going to lock in on certain patterns of play. I'm looking always at, all right, what's this kid doing? Where are they falling a little bit short, and where can I help them? That's the beauty of coaching, right? Is finding what
Yeah.
makes each kid tick and what they need to kind of take that next step in their journey.
Yeah. We're getting kind of close to the end here. So remember, if you've got a question, put it in the chat. We'll make sure we get to it. Everything that's been talked about and said today has been recorded. It will be on the Sport Fuels Life platform. So we definitely want you to kind of go there and look. Chris, I was going to ask you a question. When you were coaching college tennis, would you have ever said to a high school coach, "Hey, don't bring your kids out here to watch us practice, or don't come out here and watch us play a match"? In my mind, I think it's one of the missed opportunities for high school, middle school, just junior tennis in general. Go watch a practice of anybody, right?
Mhm.
And definitely go watch some college tennis at every level, because just watching it, in my opinion, could be the difference in you deciding, well, maybe I can do this,
Mhm.
or maybe I need to be more realistic in where I want to be or should be. Give us your thoughts on that.
I mean, I think that's you hit it right on. I mean, in what you do as a coach, you always want to show them what the next level looks like, right? And
Right.
that's how you inspire people is okay, this is where you are and this is what you want to become. And look, I think the next level looks like a lot of different things. I think, they can find college tennis at all different levels around them. Maybe you have a junior college close by or NAI or Division two, Division one. Show them all the different levels because they might see something that says, okay, that's who I want to be. That's what I want to do. And I think just the camaraderie of the collegiate tennis match is like any other. And,
Right.
when you got people standing on the side of your court with chants and cheers and cheering your name. I mean, that's pretty cool. And I think then that filters down to the high school level. I mean, it's like kids, they model what they see the players above them doing. I mean, what's happening on the pro level passes down all the way to the junior level. And I think we don't do a good enough job of showcasing that in tennis. I think it's very obvious that kids are watching on TV football, basketball, baseball. It's pretty easily accessible. I don't know how many kids really spend a lot of time watching tennis on TV if it's not the Grand Slams. And so,
Right.
being able to put them in front of a college tennis match, or any kind of high level tennis match, I think is going to inspire them of what it can be. And I think college tennis is the most exciting sport there is when it really comes down to, like you said, a 3-all match and you've got two teams standing on the other side. I mean, you want to talk about pressure and you want to talk about excitement. There's nothing like it.
Well, I mean, that's the thing too. Is like it's even when kids come in to our team and or into college tennis, it's hard to explain what the electricity and the atmosphere feels like at just a normal match. Don't even, it's not even a conference match or a big match. Just a normal college match has an electricity to it and a vibe that is hard to explain. And I think you really want to build some team unity with your high school team or your group of juniors. Take them out there and let them feel that, because they'll feel it. There'll be some hair standing up, and could make a huge difference, don't you think?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's just modeling kind of what it looks like. And I think there's so many good college coaches out there that do things the right way and, would love to engage you. And just like you said, not even just a match, but maybe even a practice. We hosted teams all the time. And, I think one of the things that you could do as a high school coach, and I always loved it when high school coaches reached out to me, is come to the last hour of our practice and then we'll let you hop on the courts and do something with your team, or something
Yeah.
like that. And I think there's opportunities like that where you can be able to kind of make a little field day out of it, just kind of a trip, and it could be even someone that's close by locally and say, hey, we're going to go watch the end of their practice, and then maybe they'll want to interact with us some, or we can take the courts for 30 minutes and
Right.
practice on a college court or whatever it may be. I mean, I think just being creative. I think there's a lot of coaches out there. It's like what I tell young coaches all the time. It's like go find somebody that's doing what you want to do really well and pick their brain and kind of like
Right.
model them and say, okay, like, because so many people are willing, successful people, they want to pass it down. They're not trying to keep it all to themselves very rarely. They're just
Yeah.
waiting for somebody to ask them. And so I
Yeah.
think that's really what conferences like this are all about is, us coming together and just sharing ideas and saying, look, I don't have all the answers, but I got 25 years worth of experience that tells me, what things I would want to pass down to somebody so they don't maybe make the same mistakes I did, or they can do it even better. And that's all you want. You want to just help the next person be great. And I think there's a lot of college coaches out there that are more than willing to share ideas, space, information.
Well, I mean, I think if the truth was told, I say this all the time. I'm basically stealing, borrowing, watching, listening, learning to everything that's out there, every coach that I can see, the good, the bad, the ugly, right? And then I take it back and I take these notes and I try to figure it out, like, how is this going to work for this group of players today?
Hmm.
Because it could change next week or next year, but we're all literally just, unless you're watching Jorge Capestani's videos online all the time, or you're on the Sport Fuels Life platform, we're all out there just kind of borrowing from everybody, aren't we?
That's right. I mean, I always say I feel bad for the kids that had me, my first few years of coaching because I was winging it, half the
Yeah.
time and just, going off what my coaches had done for me or, what I thought was the right answer. And, just the more that you're around certain people, certain things, the more that you do it, the more that you try, the more that you fail on certain things, you find out what works, what doesn't work. And, I think that's always just be learning. As a coach, always be learning. That's the key.
Well, we're gonna wrap up here, Chris. I mean, dude, I always enjoy spending time talking with you. Happy for where you're at now with Oklahoma Christian. What would you leave the coaches with? It's kind of like a wrap up from tonight, as far as kind of putting their team together and their program together. What do they need to know? What's one nugget maybe that they need before we wrap it up tonight?
I just say that as a coach, you're going to have such a big impact on the lives of kids that you coach. You're going to spend as much time around these kids during your season as maybe their own parents do at times. And so never underestimate the impact that you as a coach can have in a kid's life and be aware of that, both positively and negatively, that you're making a difference. And so I think it's really important to engage with that and put time and energy and effort behind what's the culture that you're setting, what's the value that you're giving these young kids. And you just never know what a little encouragement and a little belief in somebody can do to change their life. I mean, we all can sit here right at this moment and think about coaches, teachers, people that believed in us, that impacted us, that really inspired us. And that's what you want to be. You want to be that person that gave that one kid that you coached just a little bit more belief that they could. And it doesn't have to be tennis related, just a belief that they can. And maybe they go off and they achieve something in their life and you may never know it. I think coaching is the hardest job because it's delayed gratification. You don't know till years and years down the road what you did and you may never know. But I think if you do it with the right heart and with the right intention and you try to build the right culture and the right environment, then people are going to come through your program and they're going to be better because of it. And I think that's what I hope when, people that are taking the time to engage in conferences like this, they're already taking that first step in the process that's really important, and I would just say, kudos to everybody that spends time going through these conferences, just trying to pick up one or two things they can do better because the impact you're going to have could be really lasting for the kids that you coach.
Well, I'm going to kind of echo what MJ says. It's awesome having you on. Um, Always great to chat with you. Not only is Chris a great guy, he's got a great son too, Braden, who's now done with college, right? So
Yeah, he's done, and he's actually a teaching pro at Edmond Center Court. It's a place here in the Oklahoma City metro area. They've got 24 outdoor courts, 6 indoor courts. They run about 5 high school teams through, and yeah, he's teaching about 30 something hours a week now. So he's moved on to his coaching world, and he's got a personality for it. He's never met a stranger, so I'm proud of him.
well, it's awesome. Well, everyone, Chris Young, thanks for being here with us. We're gonna shut things down. Be back here shortly, so stick around for our next presentation. Chris, thanks so much, buddy. We'll see you again. Sports Fields Life National High School Tennis Coaches Conference. We'll see you soon.